So agenda item 7 is the recommendations from the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, and I'm assuming everyone has read those.
I'm wondering where my primary staff member serves that.
Yes, so
subcommittee.
we'd nice to get.
Chairman, I'll get him.
Yes, no, he needs to be here. I take it that you have seen those recommendations, and I would comment that it was a very significant meeting, and that the content of those, I appreciate when you get a stack for a subcommittee, you may tend to overlook it and rely on your colleagues to have done the detail. But if you haven't had an opportunity, particularly to consider the risk review and its process, then I urge you to spend a little time doing that. And you'll note that the resolution from the subcommittee to this committee was to have a comprehensive review of that process. So we've got there are a couple of issues I want to raise about it. The first is the minutes themselves. If you've had an opportunity to read the minutes, my view is that the minutes didn't actually capture the extent of our discussion and the urgency with which we'd proposed the review. And I just want to gain clarity as a technical point from this committee about the process for bringing minutes to you. It's my view that the minutes ought to be passed by the chair in the first instance for reflection and any comment prior to circulation. Can you give me your views on that and what your processes have been for the past bit?
That's how it should be.
Yeah, I agree, that's how I always had it too.
Agree.
So we've got agreement on that. Councillor Bevan, can you help me out with standing orders?
Well, the standing orders are silence on the matter, but on the matter of the chair seeing draft minutes. But everybody agrees it's would be good process. So.
Could I make a comment?
Councillor Barker.
I don't think the standing orders need to be explicit about it. The fact is that, firstly, the standing orders are owned by the 9 councillors. They don't apply to us, they're ours, our standing orders. Secondly, that the minutes are the property of the 9 councillors. They're our minutes of our meetings. We own them. Staff support that and guard them and do other things with them. But the minutes belong to the members of the committee and belong to the council. Of that there is no doubt. So from my view, that anything that goes on the minutes is the right of the committee to amend, do what they wish with, but primarily you as the chair of that meeting have been elected by this council to be the primary point of responsibility for that meeting. And therefore those minutes are to be primarily managed by yourself. There can be no argument about that.
Thank you for that. That's useful for me in that process.
That's exactly the law.
Now, I'm also a little hazy, Madam Secretary. Can you help me out? Do we actually receive recommendations? The recommendations from that subcommittee are appearing where? So, I'm just what I'm looking for is the work program. Are we accepting the work program? The report received concludes the subcommittee work program, and I had assumed 2 things should have been brought forward to this committee, and that was the content of that work program to include 2 very significant elements. One was a comprehensive review of the council's capital structure, a large piece of work, and the second was the efficiency and effectiveness review of current operations. So 2 vital bits of work, and I'd hoped to have seen those recommendations being more explicit in the recommendations coming into this paper. Can you help me there?
In terms of those reviews, it's actually in the delegation for the subcommittee to carry those out, and so they don't necessarily need to bring them forward for approval by the corporate and strategic. However, I will add into the minutes those specifics that you've mentioned, and in future what we can do is just attach the updated work program for the corporate and strategic committee.
Yes,
I
think it's important that you fully comprehend and understand where aspects of work are being undertaken, so the whole council is very aware of that. Any other comment? Councillor Belford?
Are meetings of the of that subcommittee, are they public? Are they
Yep.
public excluded, or
No, public.
are they advertised? Yeah.
So we've got the recommendations in front of you. The first one is that the Finance and Audit and Risk Subcommittee recommends that where number 1, number 2 recommends to Council that the HBRC risk assessment and management process undergoes a comprehensive review to ensure major strategic risks to the public and environment are appropriately managed. So that's an important recommendation coming forward from that committee. Is there any comment on that?
Councillor, yeah, I mean, it's through you, Mr Chairman, if you'd like me to comment. The exec did discuss the circumstances of the last risk analysis. I mean, it's something that has come through for a couple of years. I must say that it was compiled over the Christmas New Year period, which is a seriously bad time, and given the inquiry, the involvement of senior resource management and science staff wasn't really there. So, but that's no excuse. It's just limitations, really. But I agree with the chairman of that committee that a stand back and looking at council's appetite for risk is a good thing. It's important for staff to understand where your appetite for risk is and go through some of the major risk factors as we put forward at that meeting. Executive did talk about this, and we thought that it's part of council's strategy, and James Palmer was talking about the possibility of putting some of those questions into the 4th strategic workshop and reviewing risk appetite for council in that workshop. So that's not too far away. I think that's April, May, or late April or something like that. So that's our current thinking, Mr Chairman.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. Just quickly referring to the reports received, it was really heartening to see the excellent performance around health and safety from the organisation. The Audit New Zealand report included matters that you're aware of around the Ruataniwha, and that was well rehearsed with Audit New Zealand on that and resolved. The item, though, that did come out of there was the balance date for the port, and whether in fact we ought to be asking the port to come to a 30 June date. I think we should. I think we should just issue an instruction to that effect, but there might be other views on that.
Sorry, pardon my expression here, but it's a hoary old chestnut, that one. Balance day for the port.
Mr Chairman, the committee's recommendation was not to do that.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor. I was giving my personal opinion. A very good report came forward around the organisation's handling of serious fraud, etc., in the organisation. and good to see an excellent
Seems to be.
level of accountability internally for that. That was the audit report, fraud policy. And the item in particular I referred to earlier, the subcommittee work program, and I'm inclined to seek this committee's validation of the inclusion, the two items I've talked about, the inclusion of a particular work stream around the capital of the organisation and a second around the efficiency being particularly noted and recommended from this committee to council. Is there any support for that course of action?
Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, these minutes or recommendations are rather sparse and don't contain material decisions. They're not there for whatever reason. And, I believe they should have included a note about the issue of, from Audit New Zealand on port, alignment of port and council balance dates. The subcommittee work program should have been detailed, in my view. And so I really think that this committee should make recommendations based on an update set of recommendations being presented to council.
That's a very good suggestion, Councillor Dick. And given that we are recommending to council from this committee, I wonder whether we can bring those elements out in the recommendation next week. Could that
and any
sorry.
other material decisions that were made
Yes,
or issues that were traversed.
yes. In my view, this was a critical meeting of that subcommittee, setting the scene for 3 years, so we ought to have that very explicit. Councillor Hewitt.
Just to stress that's great, and that's really important for Peter and I when we're feeding things through to HBRC. So it would be helpful if we could see your draft version before Friday. Just issues like the balance date with the port. I mean, I've known that's an issue for 2.5 years now. How you want it addressed, whether we carry it through or not, we need to be seeing that information as well.
Well, we've got to meet the council by tomorrow, so that's fine. So that'll be, you'll have that.
Thank you.
I know it is, Peter, but we'll do our best.
Mr. Newman, we had discussed a potential brief one-pager on both of those two work programs. Are you in a position
Oh,
to?
yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
So are you comfortable with a recommendation that
Yep.
the Chief Executive brings back into the next council agenda those various elements we've talked about? Any other discussion on that? Do we need a resolution to that effect? Yeah, Councillor Dick, I'll second. Any other consideration of that?
So we're clear, so you're moving and seconding the recommendations here?
Yes, indeed. Sorry.
Other material matters that should have been in the
Wording on it?
included at council.
You need that in.
So the-
3-5. Are you in a position?
Mr. Chairman, it's perhaps a little unfortunate, but in fairness, the committee secretary is brand new and probably not used to the way that we do things.
Yes,
here.
yes, it was a perfect storm for that meeting.
So with your indulgence, is it all right if I've added in the NZ, the words, including a recommendation that the financial and balance dates, and also including the addition of a review of council's capital structure and efficiencies, and then what we will do is attach the actual documents to the recommendations to council? Does that fit your expectation?
It'll do. What I said was that it should include any material matters that the committee discussed and reached a position on.
Can I just take, but the thing about that though, is that if the material matters is a judgment, and that's the chair's judgment to make, and that's why the chair's input into the meeting.
And I'm happy that he makes that judgment.
I'm just reinforcing the point, that it's exactly right, so the chair then has to bring the minutes back so that we are getting, in his judgment,
Yeah.
or her judgment, exactly what we need, the information we need.
So we've had a mover and a seconder. I think we've got the general drift. I'll sharpen it up with the secretary. Are you comfortable with that very loose resolution?
Aye.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Elongate that longer than needed. So that's that. All of those items covered from item 7. I think our friends are here. Are you comfortable moving to agenda item 9 to accommodate the... All right, folk, would you like to